A dynamic storm system and cold blast will cross the United States in the next several days. This video will break down that dynamic storm setup and how the jet stream will play a significant role. Thank you for joining me in this video. I want to start today's update by breaking down how the setup in the atmosphere will dictate changes that occur at the surface as we go through the next several days. Let's start out by taking a look at what is expected to be going on in the atmosphere as we go into our Sunday, October 26th of 2025. One thing you'll notice is this area of blues moving through parts of the deep south and towards the southeast U.S. This indicates a cut-off piece of jet stream energy that's going to continue moving east as we go into the start of the week. This isn't going to be a very significant system, but it will bring in some cooler air and some rainfall as it pushes east. Where the main jet stream flow will be occurring, though, will be back to the northwest of that, where you see these tight lines moving out of parts of the western U.S. and up into the north-central parts of the country. This area of oranges and reds ahead of that main jet stream flow indicates significant ridging as the jet stream really is lifting north as you go out of the northern U.S. and into Canada. On the flip side, there's this huge area of blues expected as we go into Sunday. That is a trough or big dip in the main jet stream that's going to be moving into the northwest U.S. The reason that big trough, that dip in the jet stream in the northwest U.S. will become significant is because it's set to become partially cut off from the main flow. While the main jet stream flow will continue pushing up into Canada, it is going to get cut off and sink southeast, and that is what this huge area of blues indicates by the time we go towards around our Wednesday, October 29th. From the central U.S. going over towards the East Coast, this big cold pocket of air is going to be diving down, and there is also going to be likely some surface active weather associated with this big dip in the jet stream. The energy lingering around from that cutoff system earlier in the week could even get absorbed by this big dip in the jet stream as it continues to expand. This is likely going to be associated with active weather and a big cool down that expands over much of the east as we go towards the end of the week. Before I touch on the active weather this dip in the jet stream will bring, here's your reminder to check out the Weather Bell free trial link down in the description of this video. That's if you want awesome weather model maps at your fingertips, just like the ones that I use throughout my content. Also, if you enjoyed the rest of this video, make sure you hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss accurate videos from me in the future. With the jet stream overview and reminders complete, let's now take a look at the future radar overview and see which areas will be the most active at any time into the next several days. Starting out as we go into our Sunday, October 26th, you'll note two active zones. One of them will be down in parts of the lower Mississippi Valley and the deep south. That will be in association with that cutoff jet stream energy that's going to continue moving towards the east coast over the next couple of days. The other area of active weather will be with that main jet stream flow pushing moisture ashore out of the northeast Pacific and into parts of the northwestern United States. That will include states like Washington, Oregon, Northern California, parts of Nevada, Idaho, and Montana, where there will be some lower elevation rain showers, some gusty winds, and then as you go up in elevation, there will also be some heavier snowfall. As we go out of our Sunday and Sunday night and into Monday, that's where there will continue to be some cooler air, some cutoff jet stream energy, and even some precipitation as you go further down the east coast. Back to the northwest, though, that's where we're going to continue to see that main jet stream flow pushing some surface low pressure through the rest of Montana and Wyoming, and then out here with some rainfall that will likely push into parts of the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa. This is where things get interesting, though. Late on Monday is where we are going to see the main jet stream flow continuing to flow into Canada. We are also going to get the part of the jet stream fueling up some of this precipitation to start splitting away and moving down towards the southeast. That's where those blues are going to get towards the central and eastern U.S. by the end of the week, like I showed on that jet stream graphic moments ago. What does that mean? It means we're going to see our mid and our surface level low pressure sinking down. By the time we go towards Tuesday, for example, that means our active weather will be moving over into parts of the upper Midwest, down the Mississippi Valley, all the way down towards places like the deep south. And I think things will only organize more from there. In fact, we're going to see some of our lingering energy towards the east coast with the jet stream there actually kind of swirling back into this mid-level low-pressure center. That means an active day with moisture feeding over from the Atlantic, feeding up from the Gulf into zones like the mid-Mississippi Valley, the Ohio Valley, and the Tennessee Valley zones for our Wednesday. In fact, this zone right here that I'm circling, including states like Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, looks like a zone that could be ripe for some flooding potential Wednesday into Wednesday night. As we go out of that time frame and into our Thursday, that is where that big dip in the jet stream will continue surging over towards the south and the east. As it does so, it will continue feeding moisture on its leading edge up the east coast for the course of our Thursday and Friday. We will get some gusty winds with that. Keep in mind there will be the rain moving up the coast. There could even be some high elevation snow in the Appalachians as that cold pool moves in. There will also be a lot of cold air sinking in behind the system as it continues moving north and east into Saturday. Again, I know what I just discussed is a bit complicated. Let's talk about some of the things that I can confirm to you now, though, in terms of significant impacts. One impact that could occur will be the possibility for heavy rainfall that could induce flooding. First of all, as we go just through the next 24 to 48 hours, that little system in the southeast U.S. will continue to bring the threat for rainfall totals in excess of an inch, as that threat pushes from the lower Mississippi Valley on Sunday over to the southeast U.S. By the time we get through our Monday and early Tuesday, there could be some flooding there. Then we're going to start to see that energy diving down out of the central U.S. and then further east. For zones like the Mississippi Valley, we'll get a quick 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch of rain in many of those zones, likely out of Tuesday into early Wednesday. I don't think that's necessarily going to be enough for flooding, but what will be enough will be these 24-hour inch to 3-inch totals that likely fall from Wednesday to early Thursday. That will encompass parts of the Ohio and Tennessee Valley regions. Again, that's late Wednesday, early Thursday. As we see that mid-level low pressure and trough center somewhere here around the Ohio Valley region. Out ahead of it, we're going to continue seeing moisture flowing up the east coast to finish the week. Thursday into Friday, that could mean a risk for significant flooding with over an inch or two of rain for many zones in the mid-Atlantic and northeast/New England states. One impact that will especially slide in around and then behind the dip in the jet stream later this week, that is going to be some cooler temperatures. Let's track out how temperature zones will evolve this week, starting with a look at the early week time frame. Around our Monday, October 27th, you can expect some below average temperatures if you live in the eastern third of the country. That's in association with some recent fronts that have already moved off the east coast. There will also be that rain in the southeast U.S. helping to keep temperatures lower. Back out into parts of the plains, there will be a warm-up for the time being, but pay close attention. You can already see how the main jet stream flow moving into parts of the west will be bringing the cooler air there. Once we get half the jet stream to split off that main flow, that's when we're going to get some cooler than average temperatures moving through parts of the mountain west and then out into the central and high plains as we go out of Tuesday into our Wednesday, October 29th. Remember, there will already be some cooler than average temperatures in the east, but those will only get reinforced as we go towards the late week time frame. Pretty much the entire southeastern quadrant of the U.S. can expect below to well below average temperatures as we go towards our Halloween. Again, that makes sense given the dynamic nature of that dip in the jet stream and associated storm system that will move in. What will those anomalies look like in terms of actual temperatures day by day? Let's track that out using the National Digital Forecast Database forecast highs. As we go into the early part of this week, look at these cooler temperatures that will be in the east. Already only 40s and 50s for highs, some cooler nighttime temperatures. That's going to be, again, in association with those recent fronts that have already pushed offshore, as well as some precipitation and cloud cover keeping temperatures down. Once you come back out here towards the plains, highs on Monday will at least be around to possibly even a bit above average for this time of the year, moving through the 50s and the 60s, even as you go on up towards parts of the upper Midwest. Pay close attention, though. Here we go towards Tuesday. There comes that dip, starting to cool things down, only hitting around 50 for a high in some parts of the central and high plains on Tuesday. And then look at this. By the time we go towards Wednesday, here we go towards Thursday. This doesn't necessarily look cold, and it's not really necessarily cold, especially in comparison to what we can get in December, January. But we've got 55 up here in Wisconsin Thursday, and all the way down to where that mid-level low pressure will be moving in, we're going to have 50s for highs. Down to Tennessee, to Mississippi, to northern Alabama, it's only going to be around 55 to 60 degrees for the peak temperature on Thursday. We'll do that same thing again as we go into our Friday, October 31st. Halloween, highs will only hit 55 to maybe 65 over a broad expanse, all the way down to the Gulf Coast region of the U.S. In terms of low temperatures, those will also be crashing down night by night, especially as we go out of Wednesday into Thursday, Friday. That's, of course, when the peak of the cool down is going to come in with that dip in the jet stream in the southeast U.S. Notice Wednesday morning, you could start in the 40s over a lot of the Mississippi Valley, the Ohio Valley over to the southeast. That comes as there will be possibly some brief south or southeast winds coming in ahead of that dip coming on down. And then look at this, Thursday morning, Friday morning. I mean, look at Friday morning all the way down to the Gulf Coast. We've got upper 30s, possibly a frost into central Louisiana, central Mississippi, central Alabama, and then further north from there, you get down into the 30s, all the way back up, of course, to the northern U.S., some lower 30s, although that's more normal for those zones. With that being said, that brings me towards the end of this video, where I'd also like to take a bit of a long-range look to see how the pattern could evolve as we go into November. You're looking at the jet stream and how it will impact weather at the surface. Of course, one thing worth noting, again, there is your cutoff, or mainly cutoff piece of energy that's going to be diving down, and of course bringing all those impacts with it as it moves towards the eastern U.S. later this week. It's not going to be fully cut off, that's worth noting. It is still partially connected to the main polar jet stream flow, but note how there is also kind of this energy moving up like this, and it is down here like this. That's definitely a bit of a difference, and it is not fully connected to all of the polar jet stream's momentum. Once we go beyond the upcoming weekend, what could happen? Look at this. This blended guidance for the long term is showing the jet stream continuing to come down, but in a more connected U-shape over the eastern U.S. by the time we go towards around our November 3rd, 4th time frame. Could that mean significant cooldowns continue crashing out of maybe the central U.S. and then over towards the eastern U.S. as we go through the first week of November? That is a valid possibility based on this guidance, which continues to show the jet stream being pretty active and diving down over much of the country as we go into the first week of November. With that being said, here's a look at your headlines recap for this update. Of course, headline number one is that we will have a dynamic weather setup set to conclude October across much of the United States. A big dip in the jet stream that will be semi-cut off. That's going to bring rainfall winds and a pocket of unusually cold air all the way to the east coast. A chilly weather pattern could be the trend through the first week of November for millions with that setup. Certainly stay tuned for more details as we get closer to that. You can do that by hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications for my YouTube channel. Leave any comments and questions you have down below if you have any of those in regards to this video, of course, as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you.
One Nation Web.